Immigration is an issue here in the United States as well, with the next round of national elections 8 days away. In a moment, we'll launch a special series on the election with a look at immigration. But first, let's explain why this next round of elections is so important.
The United States holds an election every 2 years. This year's election is called a midterm because it comes in the middle of President Barack Obama's 4-year term. It's generally seen as a referendum on the president. If voters like the job he's doing, they tend to support his political party. If they don't, they vote for the opposition. In national elections, Americans vote for politicians running for seats in both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. This year, there are 36 Senate seats up for grabs. In the House, all 435 seats are up for election. Right now, the president's party, the Democrats, control the Senate by a very slim 6-seat majority, and that's including the independent members who generally vote with the Democrats. The opposition, Republicans, control the House by a 35-seat margin. U.S. political analysts say it would be almost impossible for the Democrats to take control of the House again in this election. But the Republicans have a chance to take over the Senate. That would make it even harder for Washington to overcome its political gridlock and pass meaningful laws. A U.S. president needs both sides of Congress to pass a bill before it becomes law. That's more difficult when each side is controlled by a different political party with opposing viewpoints. If both houses are controlled by the opposition political party, it also makes it hard to pass laws because the president can veto the laws they pass unless the legislation is passed by an overwhelming margin. Obama could issue something called an executive order. These are limited in scope and must be supported by the U.S. Constitution, even though the Constitution makes no provision for them. Executive orders have the full force of law, but can be easily overturned by another president. They're also subject to judicial review. The Supreme Court has the power to strike them down.
In this election, a record number of Latinos are eligible to vote, just over 25 million. That's a more than 300% increase from just a few decades ago. Traditionally, these voters have supported President Barack Obama's party, the Democrats. But this time around, Hispanic voters say they're angry and frustrated with what they say are broken promises from the president to reform immigration laws. They say he hasn't made the country a better place for so-called undocumented workers. Latinos are threatening to stay away from the polls to show Democrats they can't take their vote for granted. CCTV's Callebs begins a special series with a look at the hot-button issue of immigration reform. This is Route 2014.
In President Barack Obama's hometown of Chicago, Illinois, immigration is one of the key issues in the midterm races. Here in the neighborhood of Little Village, there are more than 20,000 undocumented workers, most from Mexico. People living in the shadows, constantly in fear of deportation.
I remember being around 12 years old when my parents told me that they themselves were undocumented. And it was like a big shock when they said, you know, we don't have papers, we're not here legally. Like, we can get deported any minute and we'll be gone like this.
It was this shock to the system that made 23-year-old Adalia Cervantes want to be a community organizer and work to reform immigration laws in the United States. Cervantes is a U.S. citizen and was thrilled 6 long years ago when candidate Barack Obama vowed to make life better for immigrants within his first 100 days in office.
I was just so excited thinking that he was going to give us this immigration reform.
But nothing has changed, despite another Obama promise for reform in 2012 and again this year. Adalia says her family and friends are still labeled illegals, a term she loathes.
Illegal is a thing. And when you're telling a person that they are illegal, it's like you're saying that they're not human.
Many Latinos here in Obama's hometown believe the president's image has become permanently tarnished. Too many promises of immigration reform have gone unfulfilled. And now many believe that Obama and Democrats in general are taking the voting bloc for granted.
Not only did he not deliver, we've seen record levels of deportations, more than any other president in U.S. history.
Lawrence Benito now calls President Obama the deporter-in-chief, saying 2 million people have been deported from neighborhoods like Little Village during Obama's administration. But what about the argument that undocumented workers are in the U.S. illegally, and critics say a drain on taxpayers while taking jobs from U.S. citizens?
You go into any restaurant, any hotel, who's washing your dishes, cleaning your hotel room, taking care of your kids? We need to have an honest conversation in this country about what we need and look who's delivering those things.
One thing Latino voters may not deliver this election: votes to the Democratic Party.
I don't want to get my hopes up on them. But then also we vote for the Republican Party. We've known that they do not want us here at all.
People are angry, they're frustrated, they're disillusioned by our system of government in which politicians say what they think people want to hear and then not deliver.
Broken promises could cost Democrats dearly at the polls. Latinos are the largest minority in the U.S. and have always been a virtual lock for the Democratic Party. But as one voter told me, she would rather vote for a Republican who openly demonizes her as opposed to a Democrat who doesn't tell the truth.
And Sean Callebs is here with us in our Washington Broadcast Center. And of course, some Latinos and Hispanics say that they're going to stay away from the polls next week. But we want to take a look at this graph because I think it's interesting. It takes a look at the turnout rates among different ethnicities. White people tend to vote more than any other group, followed by blacks. At the bottom, Hispanics and Asians. Fewer than 1 in 3 Hispanics or Asians vote in these midterm elections. Interestingly enough, you talk to this community organizer. Here is a community organizer who ran for president and had all this backing. Now these people say they're going to stay away. Were you kind of surprised at, you know, the degree of how angry they are?
Yeah, that's exactly the tone. I mean, I was really surprised. I went up there anticipating they'd be frustrated. Let's remember, Barack Obama said within his first 100 days back in 2008, he would reform immigration. Now, 6 years later, Latinos up in Chicago, his own hometown, are saying they're calling him the deporter-in-chief, saying he's deported 2 million people, split up more families than any other president. I was really surprised for just how angry, just how frustrated, and the strong language people were using to talk about him.
It's interesting, though, the Hispanics that I've spoken to in the past say if there's any hope of any kind of reform, it's going to rest with the Democrats, and yet they're unhappy with his action or lack of action on this issue. What do they think about staying away? I mean, about the overall impact?
Well, it's not just staying away. If you look at the makeup of the Latinos here in the United States, a number of them are under 18, a large percentage. And traditionally in the United States, as we get older, we tend to go to the polls more often. Even those Latinos who aren't under 18 are still very young in this country. And secondly, a lot of them live in states that really aren't contested. Texas, California. We know Texas is going to go to the GOP. We know California is going to go to the Democrats. The only exception, Florida, a very key state, and Latinos could have a very huge say in that state this year.
It's worth watching, no doubt about it. Fascinating report, and we're going to get a lot more from you.
It was a really great trip. We went through the heartland, a lot of good stories coming ahead.
All right, we're looking forward to it. Let's get more insight from a person who works on these issues every day. Ana Luisa Padilla is an immigration lawyer. Her practice focuses on family immigration and defending those who are fighting deportation or removal. A little more than 1 in 4 immigrants actually come from Mexico. Another 1 in 4 are from South and East Asia. Why do you think all the focus on Mexican immigrants and not necessarily Asians, would you say?
Thank you for having me. You know, it is an interesting phenomenon, and I think what is happening is the proximity that we have to the border with Mexico and the influx that we had this summer of unaccompanied minors and mothers and children crossing the border that created this enormous drain on our immigration system and what to do with all these individuals. So I think the American people are used to seeing more people coming from south of the border, and they are associating that with Mexicans. And that's what you are seeing in this anti-immigrant movement that has spurted this year.
Well, as you know, this is always a numbers game, so let's run through the numbers. There are some 11 million illegal immigrants living in the United States. There are 15 million naturalized citizens in the U.S., 13 million green card holders, lots of millions there. Is the anti-immigration argument in the United States just against the illegals or all of the above, would you say?
See, that's interesting too, because when you look at those who are anti-immigration, usually the comment that you get is that, well, I am not anti-legal immigration. But when you look at our dysfunctional immigration system as it currently exists, legal immigration is practically impossible. There's an average of 15 to 20 years wait to try to immigrate legally, whether it's through family or business. So you have businesses really losing talent that they aren't able to bring or keep if they've been educated here, and families being separated because the wait is enormous, you know. So, you know, to say that when you're anti-immigration, you're just anti-illegal immigration, we need to really provide a basis for that influx, you know, to really happen legally, which doesn't exist under our current system.
Well, you're on the front lines. I mean, these are real people with real issues. You deal with them every day. How frustrating is this?
It is very frustrating. And you know, what is most frustrating is that we did make concrete steps towards some type of reform last year in 2013. We saw the Senate pass a very comprehensive bill that was not perfect, but it did provide for reform of our system and reform of our laws. And what happened is that it just died in the House. So we did make some steps, and it's very frustrating to see that here we are in 2014, leading up to elections, and we still don't have a reform of our immigration laws.
Ana Luisa Padilla joining us from Los Angeles. Thank you so much. Our special series continues tomorrow with a look at healthcare. Sean Callebs traveled with our team to the U.S. city of St. Louis for that. For behind-the-scenes pictures, videos, and more about the cities our crew visited on the road, go to our website. We have a special Route 2014 section on our homepage. That's at cctv-america.com.